beneath flickering neon lights and the acrid stench of old oil mixed with cheap alcohol. Rael Thorne stood motionless in his dull black armor, back against a trading counter made from scrap ship hulls. Across from him stood the alien merchant, Glar, whose ashen-gray skin and ever-shifting multifaceted eyes seemed to analyze every breath Rael took. On the table sat a quantum distiller, a piece of banned technology lost since the last century, sealed under anti-theft glass. "This thing is worth at least 60,000 units, Rael growled. "And you insult me with that ridiculous offer." Glar narrowed his eyes and shot back. 45,000, and I'll throw in a bonus item." He pressed a button. A side door hissed open. Rael wasn't prepared for what stepped out. A tall, humanoid female figure, slender yet undeniably striking, emerged. Her skin shimmered with a silvery violet hue, and her long white hair flowed like a cascade of starlight. No chains, no panic, just her eyes, deep, cold, and sharp like a frozen galaxy. "Illyrian," Rael whispered. "She is a slave?" "Correct," Glar smirked. "Captured during a royal convoy raid. She's worth twice what you're after. I'll give you both, for 60,000 flat." "A dream deal." Rael stood still. From somewhere deep in his chest, an old instinct stirred. The kind born of a vow never to abandon the vulnerable. He looked toward the girl. Her gaze didn't tremble, it waited, as if she already knew how this story would unfold. "What's your name?" Rael asked. "Aurenya," she replied, her voice carrying a strange, melodic resonance. "I don't need rescuing, but if you intend to take me, at least guarantee my freedom once we leave this place." Rael turned to Glar. "New terms. She's free. The moment she boards my ship, and I want it in writing." 30 minutes later, as the Horizon Wraith slipped out of the black market's orbit, Rael sat in silence at the helm. Behind him, Aurenya rested quietly in the co-pilot seat, her eyes never leaving him. "Do you think you just got a bargain?" she asked, her voice low, almost mocking. Rael didn't answer. He only knew one thing. He wasn't so sure anymore. Who had actually purchased whom in that deal? The Horizon Wraith drifted silently along the cold orbit of the dead world Vecros Prime, leaving behind a faint stretched trail of light in its wake. Inside, the air carried the scent of ozone and sterile steel, a silence too deliberate to be natural. Rael Thorne laid his energy pistol on the diagnostic table, pretending to inspect it, but his eyes kept flicking toward the living quarters, where she was, Aurenya, the woman he had rescued. And yet, he was the one who felt more uneasy with every passing moment. She didn't act like any slave Rael had ever seen, and he had seen more than he cared to. No fear, no hesitation, just that unflinching gaze and a calmness that felt unnatural. He stepped into the mess bay. Aurenya sat calmly at the table, leafing through one of the ancient paper books he had collected from the Saul Archives station. "Not many people bring paper books aboard," she said, "and not many rescue a slave from a black market, only to lock her in a sealed chamber." She didn't look up. Her tone was flat, razor sharp, like a blade sharpened from the inside. Rael crossed his arms. "I don't believe you're a slave." Aurenya closed the book and looked him straight in the eyes. "Good, because I never was." His heart missed half a beat. "Then why allow yourself to be sold? You didn't run, didn't resist, you knew I'd pick you. Why?" Aurenya stood. Her posture was perfect, like a drawn line. Her white hair flowed like silver liquid in the dark. Because I needed a ship, and someone who isn't a pawn for any faction. A washed-up mercenary? Rael scoffed. Sounds like a pretty stupid gamble. Not when you've turned down 3 slaver contracts in the last 2 weeks. Rael froze. She'd been tracking him. Or someone had been feeding her intel. Then who are you? He demanded. Really? Orenya stepped closer. Her eyes softened, still silver but now almost hypnotic. I'm someone that, when you learn the truth, you'll wish you never asked. Rael didn't step back, but he didn't speak either. Instead, he silently reached for the pistol on the side table and holstered it. Not as a threat, just instinct, self-preservation, Orenya noticed. She smiled faintly. No anger, no hurt, just waiting for the right moment. Good. The instinct's still there. You're going to need it. She walked past him, her soft robe brushing the steel floor, leaving behind a silence heavier than the artificial gravity. Rael stood alone in the room. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he was in the middle of a rescue, or a game where he had never been the one in control. Outside the ship, space shimmered ever so slightly. A faint signal was beginning to track the horizon wraith. 3 hours after that chilling exchange, Rael Thorne still couldn't focus. His hand moved over the control panel, but his thoughts spiraled around a single voice. Hers. I'm someone that, when you learn the truth, you'll wish you never asked. Those words left cracks in his old neural core, and he was a man who'd faced battalions and rebels, but nothing had ever unsettled him in such a female form. A soft alert blinked on the warning system, a trace signal, faint, following, matching course. Rael activated the long-range radar in emergency mode. An untagged object was tailing them, keeping a perfect distance, not close enough to trigger sensors, not far enough to lose. Damn it, he muttered. We're being tracked. He stormed into the auxiliary bay. Orenya stood in the center of the room, not surprised, didn't even turn around, as if she already knew. Rael, you have 2 choices, trust me and live, or keep doubting and die. Very soon. Rael approached slowly, eyes full of fire and doubt. Who are you? I searched every Etherian archive. There's no such name as Orenya Velsaril. Where did you come from? Then she turned, her eyes no longer soft like hours before. They ignited, burning with a violet-silver glow. And when she spoke, it wasn't a single voice. It resonated. I am Orenya, sole heir of the Cloudvale bloodline, exiled princess of House Saril, and target number 1 of the Alpha 9 strategic coalition. The air froze. Rael stepped back, hand instinctively landing on the grip of his holstered weapon. Princess, you let yourself be sold? You planned for me to take you? I needed a ship, one unaffiliated with any faction, and a man reckless enough to speak up in a black market. You were chosen. I'm no pawn. No, she replied gently. You're the last man I believe still capable of choosing. Red lights flared across the ceiling. The tracking signal had closed in, now within orbital range. There was no doubt. The pursuers were boxing them in. Who is it? Rael demanded. Who's after you? Orenya looked at him. No longer a princess, but a woman on the edge of survival. They don't want to capture me. They want me erased and everything I carry. Rael's breath shortened. His heartbeat unraveled. Not from fear, but because he realized he'd already bound himself to something far more dangerous than war. An ideal, being hunted to extinction. I'm not here to save the galaxy. I'm just a burned-out mercenary, Wano, with a dying ship. Orenya stepped closer, placing a hand over his chest, where his heart thundered beneath the fabric. Number, you're the last one still free enough to choose the right thing. Rael looked at her, and in that moment, amid engine hums, sirens, and a web of lies unraveling around them, he still couldn't draw his weapon, because his heart, for the first time in years, didn't want to run. Outside the ship, the silhouette of the pursuer began to take shape. A tear-cut Freedom Hunter-class ship, only deployed by royal assassination syndicates. And they leave no survivors. Rael had never feared war. He had survived the Grey Corridor campaign. He'd watched his comrades explode into nothing on the trenches of Argus V. He wasn't afraid of guns, not blood, not death. But now, facing those silver-violet eyes filled with unwavering trust and the blaring alarms echoing through the ship's walls, Rael felt something unsettlingly close to fear, not of the enemy outside, but of something worse. He no longer knew who he was. "I'm no hero," he said. "I'm not here to save a kingdom, not a princess. And I sure as hell don't want to die for someone I met less than a day ago." Orenya said nothing. She simply looked at him. No anger, no pleading. Just a gaze, silent, like storm waves beneath frozen ice waiting for the thaw. "I understand," she finally said. Her voice brushed against the frayed edges of his nerves, soft and exhausted. "I once believed there was nothing left worth saving." The ship shuddered. A distant impact rippled through the hull. "They're firing warning shots," Rael muttered. "These bastards don't negotiate." "They won't stop," Orenya whispered. "Not for me. Not for you. Not for anyone who might change anything." She stepped closer. Each footfall seemed to press into the weight in his chest. "I don't need a warrior. I need someone who can say no even when the entire galaxy screams for silence. Because if it's not you, there will be no one else." Rael turned away. He was shaking, truly shaking. Not from fear of guns, but because he knew if he said yes, if he took one more step, he'd never again be just a drifting mercenary. He would be part of something larger than himself, and that, more than death, terrified him. "I don't know what to do," he confessed. "I used to believe in ideals, in honor, in justice, but all of them betrayed me." "So was I," she whispered, placing a hand gently on his chest. "Betrayed by my own bloodline." A pause, two broken paths, two lives colliding for one fleeting instant in the void, as death closed in from every direction. Rael gripped the strap of his weapon. "You have a shadow lane. Some hidden corridor they won't anticipate." Orenya pressed her lips together, then gave a small smile, like the moon breaking through a storm cloud. "I do, but I'll need access to the auxiliary controls. And your full trust." Rael looked at her, and for the first time, he nodded, slow, heavy, but resolute. "You have it, both." Outside, the enemy vessel locked on, but within the Horizon Wraith, a new alliance took form, not through treaties, not through firepower, but through something simpler. Trust between two souls who had lost everything. Orenya's hand slid across the interface. A violet glow pulsed from her skin, merging with the quantum navigation systems. "Hold on. This next jump, there's no turning back." Rael looked at her, and for some reason, he no longer wanted to. The control deck of the Horizon Wraith was no longer just a cockpit. Pale violet light streamed from the quantum gate Orenya had just opened, flooding across the aging consoles and merging with the ship's faint blue system glow, creating a strange hybrid ambiance, as if the vessel had just awakened. Rael stood beside her, sweat beating at his temples, not from fear, but because this was the first time he'd ever let anyone dive so deep into the heart of his ship. "Just don't make it explode," he muttered dryly. Orenya tilted her head, lips pressed as if suppressing a quiet smile. "I've never done anything without consequences." The screen flickered into chaos, a stream of fresh quantum code injected directly into the hidden layers of the Wraith's core systems. An image began forming, a perfect illusion of the Horizon Wraith itself. "You're creating a shadow?" Rael asked. "Not just a shadow. It's a quantum ghost, refined enough to fool enemy sensors. Once they lock onto it, we'll vanish." "And then what? We loop around?" Rael asked, hand already gripping the auxiliary thruster control. Orenya turned toward him, eyes lighting up with something close to anticipation. "We strike back." Outside, the void seemed to hold its breath. Two hunter ships still tailed the Horizon Wraith, locked onto their target. They didn't realize that at that very moment an energy duplicate of the vessel was being propelled away, while the real one turned sharply, diving back against the vector of space cloaked in perfect silence. "Open Tier 3 spin vector. Prepare for phase jump," Orenya instructed, voice tight with focus. "Signal masking successful. Enemy system still locked onto the decoy." Rael nodded, hands tightening around the controls. "Damn, you're good." She looked at him. For the first time, her eyes softened. "I had to be, to survive." Just as the ship initiated its quantum shift, the Horizon Wraith surged past the tail of one of the pursuers. No one expected it. For prey to reverse course and become the predator. "Ion cannons prepped. I want them disabled, not dead," Rael said. "Unexpected morality? From a mercenary?" "I only kill those who deserve it," he replied. "The rest, I let them live long enough to remember my name." They moved as one. Orenya's hands guided the quantum weave. Rael's fingers danced over weapons lock. They were no longer strangers. They were parts of the same machine, operating in rhythm, breathing the same war-born breath. 3, 2, 1, fire. A streak of blinding white-blue light erupted from the Wraith, piercing the enemy ship's hull. Its systems collapsed into static, shutting down without a scream, not dead, but helpless. The second ship veered off, but it was too late. The Horizon Wraith was already gone from their grid. Inside the cockpit, silence reigned. Rael slumped back in his seat, exhaling hard. Orenya smoothed back her now messy hair, her breath steady. "We just escaped death," she said like one who had wagered everything. "No." Rael's voice darkened. "We just declared war. On those who know who you are, and will kill to make sure no one else ever finds out." In the dim light that followed the razor-tight tactical maneuvers, there was a moment of quiet. Rael looked at the woman beside him, no longer the girl who was sold, but the first comrade he'd had since he became a ghost with a ship. And he started to think, just maybe, he'd made the right choice. After the chaos of quantum deception and razor-edge tactics, the Horizon Wraith now drifted silently in a neutral sector of the Alluvium star corridor, where light from 3 suns bled into one another, forming a loose, shimmering ribbon of rainbow through the void. Rael sat alone in the engineering bay, idly rolling an empty energy tube between his fingers. He wasn't a mechanic, but sometimes dismantling and reassembling soulless parts helped silence the disorder in his mind. What had he just done? Rescued a princess, challenged a royal dynasty, or was it just her eyes? He sighed, leaning his head back against the cool metal wall of the ship. You always go this quiet after a fight? Her voice, software, but enough to make his heart miss a beat. Orenya stood there, no royal cloak, no violet light dancing from her fingertips. Just a woman with long white hair slipping over her shoulder, holding 2 glasses of water. Rael looked at her. Her eyes were no longer cold. They waited for something. I'm not used to anyone asking, he admitted, voice rough. I'm usually the last one left standing. She stepped closer, placing a glass beside him. As for me, she sat on the floor, her back parallel to his. I'm usually the one left behind. Silence fell. Not for lack of things to say, but because too many things couldn't be said at all. I used to think no one deserved trust anymore. Orenya's fingers turned the glass slowly in her hand. The ones I called brothers betrayed me. The one I called father tried to end me before the prophecy could spread. Rael turned. He had never heard a voice carry so many broken layers. I'm not a good man, he murmured. I once walked away from someone I swore to protect because I couldn't believe in anything anymore. She looked at him. The light from the auxiliary panel danced softly across her cheek, like stars resting on her skin. Maybe that's why I chose you. Rael let out a quiet laugh, not bitter, not defensive, just tired, but gentle, and then stillness. Orenya tilted her head, resting it against his shoulder just slightly. No permission needed, and strangely, he didn't pull away. You know, Rael said, this is the first time in years. I'm not thinking about an exit route. I'm just here, he continued, and I don't want to run anymore. Then don't, she whispered, because if you do, I'll be alone again. In the engineering bay of a battered ship, adrift in an unnamed stretch of space, 2 people who had lost faith in everything sat shoulder to shoulder like worn pieces of iron, finally drawn into orbit by a magnetic field of their own. No kiss, no sudden touch, just presence. And in that quiet, something had begun. A dormant system alert blinked softly. A minor signal, not a threat. Orenya didn't lift her head. Rael didn't get up. They just sat there, amid the low hum of the ship and the gathering storm of emotion rising from one thing: trust. But no matter how long they sat beside one another, it could never erase the wounds each of them carried. And that night, when Rael couldn't sleep, he walked into the med bay, where fate was already waiting. Again, the space around them seemed frozen. The ship drifted in a void between 2 star-band frequencies. No signals, no interference, only silence, perfect and terrifying. Rael entered the med bay to check a minor burn from their latest skirmish. But he didn't expect her to be there. Orenya sitting alone on the diagnostic bench, her back bare, and across it, under the cold white light, a scar, not recent, old, deep, crude, like it had been burned into her by some archaic torture device. He froze at the threshold, no words. She didn't turn around. She just said quietly, "You wanted to know who I am? This is the part I tried to erase from the royal records." Rael stepped forward, slowly, as if the moment might shatter at the slightest movement. "Who did that to you?" "The one I called father." Her voice trembled, barely but real. He said I was a threat to the purity of the bloodline because I carried the mark of genetic divergence. Rael clenched his fist. In that moment, if the man were in front of him, Rael would have pulled the trigger without blinking. Orenya turned around. The scar glinted under the medbay lights, a jagged flash of betrayal etched into flesh. That was the first time I learned. Family isn't always the safest place. It's where the deepest damage can be done. Rael knelt down in front of her, not to beg, not to comfort, but to meet her eyes, level. I was betrayed too, he said quietly. By the organization I believed in. Left behind by the squad I trusted. I survived, but I lost everything. Orenya looked into him. No more Illyrian frost. Just a woman, searching to see if the one before her truly understood the wound she carried. I don't need anyone to save me, she whispered. I know, Rael answered, but maybe someone should stay just to say I'm here, and I'm not leaving you. For the first time, she cried. No tears fell, just a soft dilation of her pupils, like glass under heat. And Rael, who had survived war, death, and abandonment, all he could do was extend his hand, not to hold, just to offer, and she took it, without hesitation. They said nothing more, because the deepest truths rarely need words. Just the scar across her back and the look in his eyes were enough to say, we don't come together because we're whole. We come together because we both know pain. In the shadowed corner of the med bay, the sensor lights dimmed, leaving only the faint shimmer across their joined hands. Rael whispered, as if it were a vow without ink, if you have scars, I'll be your armor. And if I lose my way, you'll be the last lighthouse. Orenya didn't answer. She only tightened her grip, and for the first time she slept in peace. After that night, they were no longer strangers. But between understanding and bonding forever, there is always a silence. A silence not everyone dares to cross. Rael understood that, and he also knew Orenya was holding something back, something larger than her name, larger than the scar, something older than war, older than dynasties. They stood in the ship's core chamber, where the quantum heart of the horizon wraith pulsed in quiet rhythm. Pale violet light streamed through the swirling energy column, casting their skin in a hue that felt sacred and not entirely of this world. Orenya wore the silver-white ceremonial garb of ancient Illyrian tradition. The first time Rael had seen her in anything not built for battle. I have nothing left to keep, she said softly. If you truly want to walk into this war beside me, then I need you to understand once we begin the rite, there is no turning back. Rael nodded, slow, but certain. I've been turning back my whole life, that's enough. Orenya opened her palm. There, resting in the center of her hand, was a small glowing sphere, violet, blue, and white spiraling together like a galaxy compressed into light. The sanctum oath of life, she whispered, performed only once in a lifetime. If we match, our souls will resonate. If we don't, one of us will fall. Not quite like engagement where I'm from, Rael said dryly. Worst case there, you just lose a ring. Orenya gave a quiet laugh, but her eyes were wet. I don't need you to be Illyrian, I just need you to be honest. Rael reached out, no hesitation. The orb instantly split, two twin spirals of energy wrapping around their arms. One heartbeat, two currents, and a low hum rose from the ship's systems, as if the wraith itself was bearing witness to something unseen since it was born in the furnace of stars. I, Rael Thorn, a man with no home, no faith left, freely place my heart and memory beside you, Aurenya, not out of duty, not for title, but because I choose you and will choose you again and again. She touched her fingertips to his forehead. They trembled just barely. I, Aurenya Velsarel, born of a bloodline now hunted, pledge my soul to the one standing before me. And even if the world turns its back, I will still walk with you. And in that moment, light exploded, a wave of energy radiating from their bodies, piercing the ship's hull, rippling across space like a stone dropped into still water. The Wraith's sensors recorded a resonance pattern never seen before. Life and light fused into one shared frequency, dual wave. When the light dimmed, Rael remained standing, breath ragged. So did Aurenya, but her eyes now glowed with something he had never seen before. Peace. No more fear. No more running. Only each other. Rael took her hand. What happens if they find out we've bonded? Aurenya answered with a tired but proud smile. They won't be hunting a runaway princess anymore. They'll fear a survival pact between two species. Horizon Wraith had barely cleared the quantum crossing zone for 40 minutes when the sensors blared. A Leviathan-class destroyer emerged. No warning signal, no request for identification, only a lock. Targeted, precise. They're early, Rael hissed. Specialized hunter class. The kind Illyrian governments send when they don't want someone to be found, ever. Aurenya stood close to the console, her eyes no longer soft silver. They burned violet, like halos incinerated within her pupils. They're not here to capture anymore, she said coldly. They're here to erase spiritual resonance. In the weapons bay, Rael scrambled to rig the interference modules. His hands trembled, not from fear, but because adrenaline was firestorming his veins. You know who they've sent? Purge Sentinels, Royal Assault Squads, trained to kill myths. Aurenya touched her wrist. A faint glow rose, the sanctum oath mark still warm on her skin. Good, because we're not myths anymore. We're the truth. The Leviathan fired its first EMP salvo. The Wraith rocked violently. A ghostly mist crept through the auxiliary chamber. Grade 3 magnetic disruption. No time for defense, Rael shouted. We fight, now! Rael, open the core chamber, Aurenya called back. I'll initiate soul resonance with the ship. He froze. Are you sure? Alone? Number, we do this together. Their hands met on the ship's core interface. And the sanctum pulse activated. A torrent of white-violet energy surged from the console, flooding into the tactical systems. Warning lights shifted color. All weapon systems shifted into soul-linked mode. Rael had never seen anything like it. The ship, it felt alive, and it fought to the rhythm of their hearts. Outside, the Leviathan escalated. 3 fighters detached, flanking the Wraith in a triangular encirclement. Deploy tier shift deflection shields, he barked. I'll cover the rear. Do you still have enough strength? Aurenya pressed her lips tight, sweat across her brow, but her eyes never wavered. No more strength, only faith. A plasma beam screamed across the hull. A long fracture split the port side, but not through. At that moment, Rael engaged reverse thrusters. The Wraith spun counterwise. 2 fighters collided in its wake. The third was torn apart by a column of raw energy from beneath. It came from Aurenya. Rael turned, stunned. From her body, veins of light radiated outward, no longer just violet, now glowing white with a blue core pulsing its center. You're Not just a princess, she said. I am the last conduit of primordial seral energy, and I'm done running. She raised her hand. The ship responded. Panels shifted without commands. Wings folded, weapons bays opened across dual-axis launchers. A cross-vector assault pattern deployed in under 3 seconds. Fire. One word, and the stars shook. The soul-synced beam launched straight through the Leviathan's command deck. The enemy vessel, dead. The Horizon Wraith drifted silently through electromagnetic debris. Rael was drenched in sweat, breath ragged. Orenya collapsed to the floor, eyes dim but still radiant. Rael knelt beside her. You just used yourself as the war core. She nodded. Because I believe. Faith births a power the galaxy could never predict. And Rael understood. He was no longer a mercenary. He was part of a new legend, one that had just awakened. After the battle, the Horizon Wraith drifted silently across a neutral wasteland corridor, far beyond military signals, beyond the scanning arcs of royal satellites. Inside the med bay, Rael sat motionless. On the biomonitor in front of him, Orenya's vital stats blinked in erratic rhythms, far beyond the physiological norms of both Illyrians and Earthborn humans. The resonance energy is still flowing through her bloodstream, he murmured. She made herself the core of the ship's battle system. But at what cost? He turned toward the medical bed. Orenya lay there, not unconscious, but in the still meditative state unique to her kind. Breath slow, skin glowing faintly, forehead damp with sweat. She was still radiant, but for the first time that radiance carried a fragility, the fragility of a being carrying another life within her. A soft beep echoed from the gene scanner. Rael turned. A double helix symbol flashed on screen, signaling a hybrid genetic structure. He froze. No way. He checked again, then a third time. Each test confirmed it. A living embryo developing inside Orenya, one half human, one half primordial Illyrian. Rael dropped into the seat, speechless. The door slid open. Orenya stepped in, leaning on the frame, still unsteady but her eyes alert. I heard the alarm. Rael, what's wrong? He turned to her, slowly. You're pregnant. She stopped, didn't blink. Impossible. Illyrians only conceive during specific reproductive rites, with spiritual architecture triggered by... She trailed off, looked at him, then down at her hand. The Sanctum Oath. Rael nodded. In that moment, we were fully synchronized, soul, pulse, and life. Orenya placed a hand on her stomach. There was no movement, but there was energy, clear and unmistakable. I can feel it. She sat down as though every ounce of strength had drained from her. Rael, a hybrid life form. This isn't just a child. This is proof of something the galaxy has forbidden. That humans and Illyrians can bond and live. Rael stepped forward, kneeling before her. He took her hand gently. I don't know what to say. Then don't. Just stay. She leaned her head onto his shoulder, silent, as though even one wrong breath might dissolve the child inside her, like a quantum dream lost in the void. They'll hunt us, she whispered, harder than ever before. They won't allow this life to exist. Then they'll have to learn how to lose, Rael replied, his voice low but sharp as a blade drawn from its sheath. They said nothing more, only her hand, resting on her womb, and his hand, resting atop hers. And between those hands, a heartbeat, faint but real, not captured by a monitor, but felt within their souls, A child, a life, and a future the galaxy would never see coming. One day after discovering the life growing inside Orenya, the Horizon Wraith received a cracked top-level encryption signal, not from the Illyrian royal forces, but from the Kolvar, a species thought extinct after the Illyrian Wars. But clearly they had not vanished. They detected the hybrid gene signal, Orenya said, pale. To them, a life form bearing both Illyrian and human blood is the ultimate threat. Because it is the future, Rael answered quietly. 3 Kolvar strike-class ships emerged near the mid-sector corridor of Heratos 4. No greeting, no negotiation, only one message. Surrender the child, break the Sanctum Oath, or be erased from the timeline. Rael fastened his combat straps. For the first time since meeting Orenya, his eyes held something beyond survival instinct. They held the gaze of a father. In the tactical chamber, Orenya stood beside him, her hand resting over her abdomen, where a faint light shimmered through her clothing like a divine pulse. If they take the child, they'll use it to reverse the resonance, turn souls into weapons. They won't touch it, Rael said, voice low and firm. The battle began. No time for plans. The Kolvar deployed temporal refraction fields, bending time at the moment of impact to deflect incoming attacks. I need you to channel the Sanctum energy through the ship's core, Rael shouted. I'll handle the exterior. Orenya nodded, though her hands trembled. Not from fear, but because inside her now, there was more than one soul. Rael, if I fall, you won't, because I won't let you. He kissed her forehead, quick but enough to carry one thing, faith. Rael charged into the secondary weapon deck, face to face with Kolvar biomech fighters. Speed, brutality. But this time, he wasn't fighting to survive. He was fighting to protect. Each bullet whispered a vow. No one touches my blood. No one takes my child. In the ship's core, Orenya sat on the floor, her hand plugged directly into the energy port. Every vein burned like molten steel. Her heart pulsed in heavy, aching waves. She screamed, not from pain, but to keep life from being corrupted by the alien frequencies. A Kolvar interference wave struck the core. The ship flickered. She nearly lost consciousness. And then, a tiny heartbeat echoed. Not hers, not Rael's. The child, stable, clear, unyielding. You're not afraid, she whispered. Then neither am I. Meanwhile, Rael was slammed into the bulkhead. A shard pierced through his shoulder armor. Blood streamed. But his grip didn't loosen. He stood, cut the secondary circuit, activated the quantum melee module, and charged straight into the conduit chamber bare-handed against a Kolvar infiltrator. A roar, a burst of white-violet light. It consumed the entire corridor. Orenya jolted upright, her eyes no longer silver. They were white, crystalline. From her body, a sphere of energy wrapped around the ship's core. The Kolvar vessels recoiled, as if rejected by a form of life beyond calculation. Rael crawled into the central chamber, blood-soaked and reeling. Orenya was there, exhausted, drained, but alive. And the child's heartbeat, faint but solid as stone. Rael knelt beside her, took her hand. No more doubt. We are a family now. She leaned against him, whispering a vow without needing ceremony. And I'll burn the galaxy to ash if anyone dares touch my child. After the battle with the Kolvar, the Horizon Wraith drifted silently past the dead planetary belt of Heratos 4. Once a military outpost, now reduced to ash, spiraling through toxic strata. Rael brought the ship into stealth mode, Orenya, still weak, remained connected to the life recovery system. The ship's virtual medic reported fetal resonance frequencies remain stable, but Illyrian metabolic conversion is accelerating too rapidly. Without a stable recovery environment, both lives are at irreversible risk. Rael stared at the galactic map in silence. He knew there was no such thing as absolute safety anymore. "We can't keep running," he said hoarsely. "Our child needs a place to be born without being hunted." Orenya pressed her hand lightly to her belly where a faint glow still shimmered beneath her skin. A home, not a base, not a shelter, a real place to live. She pointed to a sector on the 3D star map, a dim light deep within unclaimed space, an experimental Illyrian colony long erased from official records after the civil wars. "Here," she whispered, "Valerie Prime. Never fully terraformed but semi-stable climate, primitive biostructures, and most importantly, no one remembers it exists." Rael scanned the data. Valerie Prime, a world untouched by war, unpolluted, unclaimed by any civilization. "Then we're not finding safety, we're creating it." They were no longer fugitives, they were founders. The journey began, not at breakneck speed, but with quiet, deliberate acts of resolve. Rael converted the ship's weapon systems into eco-regenerative modules. Orenya, despite her condition, coded a new biosphere resonance pattern for Valari. They landed after 11 days, in a valley blanketed with glowing moss and shimmering lakes. The air, thin but breathable. The sky, 3 moons spinning in slow, protective arcs. And there, on soil that had never known blood, Rael raised the first energy tower. Orenya planted the first seed, infused it with life energy from her own hands. "This isn't a victory," Rael said, watching the stars bloom over the ridge. "This is a beginning," Orenya nodded. "The child in Mila will not grow up in fear. It will grow in life, in love, and in the will of 2 souls, once called outcasts." Night fell. They sat beside the first fire kindled by human hands on Valari Prime. Orenya leaned against Rael. The child stirred gently within her, as if in agreement. Rael whispered, "Maybe one day the stars will find us again. But until then, we'll leave behind one thing." Orenya finished, her eyes glowing with quiet certainty. "Proof that love and will can ignite a whole planet anew." Day 48 on Valari Prime. The 3rd energy pillar had stabilized. Native vegetation had begun adapting to the artificial nutrients Orenya designed. Rael constructed a protective dome around the biocore zone, the place where Orenya was expected to give birth in less than a month. Everything seemed peaceful, until the low-tier interference sensors sounded an alarm, an unencrypted signal, but with royal code structuring. "Not Kolvar, not mercenaries," Rael muttered. "It's Illyrian." "They've come," Orenya said quietly. Her voice wasn't trembling, but it wasn't cold either, just tired. The ship that approached flew no banner, but Rael recognized the design. Royal Commission class, used only for high sovereign missions. Before Rael could react, Orenya stepped forward. "No hiding, no running. If I give birth while turning my back to the darkness, our child will never learn to face the light." They hadn't come to capture, they came to negotiate. Leading the delegation was Velkor Saril, Orenya's uncle, former commander of the Royal Guard. "You left without notice," he began. "Broke the Blood Sanctum Pact, created a life outside sanctioned lineage. But I'm not here to punish. I'm here to bring you home." Orenya clenched her fists. Home? To a palace where they want my child erased from the bloodline? Or to a throne I never chose to ascend? Velcor stared at her for a long moment. This world belongs to no one, but that child carries Illyrian blood. It will become a political question for the entire crown. And you, Orenya, can no longer remain an independent entity. Rael stepped forward. She's not going anywhere, and my child will grow up in freedom, not as a diplomatic artifact. Velcor looked at Rael. No contempt, no fury. I used to be like you, he said quietly. But time and the crown do not forgive those who dream. Then go back, Orenya replied, her voice trembling now. Tell them, Princess Orenya Velsaral is dead. Only a mother remains, and a life that carries the future of two worlds. Velcor didn't respond. He placed a small device on the stone pedestal, a high-frequency transmitter engraved with the royal seal. When the child is born, send the signal. We won't interfere, unless you choose to come back. Then they left. No threats, no weapons, just a chill sharper than any blade. The final invitation delivered by blood. That night, beside the fire, Rael and Orenya sat in silence. If you send that signal, Rael asked, I'll take you back. If I don't, then I'll build another world as long as you choose for yourself, not for me, not for them. Orenya said nothing. Then gently she placed her hand over her belly and whispered, not to Rael, but to her child. I was once a princess, but you will not inherit a crown. You will inherit freedom. High above Valari, 3 tiny stars shifted, the flickering signatures of the royal fleet withdrawing. Rael watched them, still holding her hand. Orenya said nothing, but her eyes, they burned brighter than the stars. And they both knew this wasn't over. Valari Prime, Night 87. A cascade of auroral rain swept across the pale violet sky, a rare phenomenon that only occurred when planetary core energy collided with radiation from the Tharian cluster. Inside the life tent set up amid the crystal forest, Orenya went into labor. No medical team, no royal equipment, only Rael, an unconditional, absolute love. Are you afraid? He asked, gripping her hand tightly. No, Orenya nodded softly. I'm not afraid, because our child chose to come into this world, and I'm choosing to bring it here. Pain coursed through every Illyrian nerve. But she didn't scream, because between the contractions one truth pulsed as clearly as a Terran war drum. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The violet aura around her body surged. Rael held her shoulders, eyes glistening, not from sorrow but awe. I can feel it, a third heartbeat, resonating completely with ours. Orenya wept, but her tears were light, luminous drops that fell onto her collarbone and dissolved into the protective energy field. And then, the child was born, no cry, just a single pulse. A soul wave that rippled outward, touching every living thing within a 10-kilometer radius. Crystals in the forest lit up. The waters in the lake shimmered with faint lavender radiation. Even the moons above, 3 in total, shifted in tandem, aligning into a perfect line. Rael held the child, a small body. Skin kissed with blue-violet glow, eyes already open and silver like the mother. But its tiny hand gripped Rael's finger as if it knew instinctively who he was. A hybrid, Rael whispered, but not an abomination, a beginning. Orenya leaned against him, exhausted, but eyes alight. What's their name? Rael asked. She smiled, as if the answer had always existed, long before life itself. Lyran, in ancient Illyrian. It means the flame that rewrites destiny. 3 days later, the Royal Satellite Array detected a biological resonance never before recorded. They couldn't triangulate it. Every time they tried, the signal disappeared, as if it had never been. On Valari Prime, Rael and Aurenya stood atop a hill, looking down at what they had built. No longer a survival base, but a living world. "They'll come again," Rael said. "They'll try to take the child, or kill, or use them as a symbol for an empire we refused. Then we'll teach our child to walk on free ground," Aurenya whispered, squeezing his hand. "And to protect that freedom, not with weapons, but with belief in themselves. This story won't end the way you think. No galactic parades, no crowns placed upon noble brows, only a flame, small but eternal, a family, a planet, a child with eyes bearing the hue of two worlds, and a new legend, written with every breath. There are some stories that don't begin with war and don't end in triumph, but begin with a meeting that seemed meaningless and end with a life form born of two bloodlines, but one heart. The story of Rael, a survivor exiled from society, and Aurenya, a princess cast out from an empire that no longer believed in human hearts, was never just about a star-crossed pair or a child born among the stars. It was a story about faith when no one else dared to believe, about choice when every path was deemed wrong by old standards, and about life in a galaxy that had forgotten how to embrace difference, from a single touch to a sacred soul bond, from a child in the womb to a whole world being seeded anew. Rael and Aurenya did not conquer the galaxy. They simply refused to be erased by it. And their child, Lyran, will grow up carrying no divine mission. Not meant to save anyone. Not born to represent anyone. Only to know this: you were born a miracle, not because anyone said so, but because your parents chose to believe it. This is not a story that will be written in the pages of galactic history, because it is too small for an empire to notice, but too vast for any soul to forget. And if you're still here, still listening at this final moment, then remember this: not everyone is born to change the world, but anyone can begin again with a single choice, even if that choice is simply not leaving someone behind. Thank you for journeying with me through all 14 chapters. If you believe humanity deserves love, even when the whole universe turns away, share this story. Because sometimes just a glance, a voice, is enough to reignite a fire in the darkest night. is enough to reignite a fire in the darkest night.